You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WIAB, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music.
All night long I've been watching you. Think I'm ready to make my move. If I get lucky, you'll be with me tonight.
What's that saying about true friendship? If you have 2 or 3 really good and true friends in your life, you're fortunate. Well, what you're about to hear is partially a story of friendship, but it's also the story of the life of a man many people in the Jackson area and beyond have true admiration for.
It's so easy, all you gotta do is say when, and I'll come running, say when.
Chalmers Davis may not be a name you hear every day or have ever heard, but he made quite a name for himself in the realm of some of the best musical sidemen. The song you're hearing features Davis on keyboards. It's from the group The Shooters, of which he was a member. They had Billboard chart success in the late 80s for Epic Records. But beyond that string of hits, Chalmers Davis could tickle those ivories with the best. Before The Shooters, it was the University of North Alabama, where he earned a degree in commercial music. After that, it was touring and recording with acts as prestigious as Johnny Cash and Bobby Rush. Then Davis spent 24 years in Little Richard's band, mostly as the organist, but also occasionally playing the piano. He played all over the world, in gigs like Letterman and Leno, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, The Today Show, and a Johnny Cash Christmas special. Coming up, you'll hear the story of life after the international success and the benefit for the pop music scene in Jackson and for the faith community in central Mississippi. But first, this hit from The Shooters.
Eyes were burning through you, and someone rings you late at night, but no one says hello at the end of your line. That's me, you know, breathing warm in your ear. All day I do find those sweet old memories never cross my mind. Oh, oh, they only come out at night. When you look out your window and it's 3 o'clock, driving myself crazy. And when you hear a rustle or the back door squeaks, turn off the lights and go back to sleep. That's me, you know, haunted by what used to be. 'Cause all day I do find those sweet old memories never cross my
Chalmers Davis was long involved in the music programs at a couple of churches. You might know one of those for Wells Fest. That's Wells United Methodist Church. Another was Broadmoor Baptist Church. Davis made friends and brothers alike in those places, but his spiritual walk also included helping souls groove by playing gigs with bands and musicians all over Mississippi after his retirement from the road in 2013. It was just a few months ago that he learned an illness would likely take his life. When he went into the hospital for treatment, some of his best friends came by to visit and help him rally. But Davis finished his earthly course September 14th. Since then, some of the people who have admired his life and work have put together a tribute set for next Thursday, October 17th at Hal & Mal's at 6 p.m. So if you don't know the work of Chalmers Davis, and you've already gotten a taste, just sit back. Coming up, you'll hear from one of his closest collaborators and the story of how he spent his last 15 years, from Scott Albert Johnson. That's coming up on the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB. You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music. I'm Chris Davis, your host, and this week you're listening to a program about Chalmers Davis, a musician who was nationally known for playing with Little Richard, but also was known in the Jackson metro area and around Mississippi for his post-retirement work. Davis died from an illness September 14th, and next week at Hal & Mal's in Jackson, his fans and friends will be paying tribute to him at 6 o'clock Thursday night, October 17th. Perhaps one of his closest friends was Scott Albert Johnson, Jackson-area singer-songwriter who has had some national success with his own music and even a song that was co-written by Chalmers Davis. So, Scott, I was thinking to myself before we talked that this conversation could be awkward or it could be incredibly uplifting because we are kind of both in the same boat here. Last year, I lost my best friend to cancer. You know, to know somebody for over 20 years and then lose them to this terrible disease certainly puts you through through kind of an emotional ringer. And I know that you and Chalmers Davis had a long-standing collaboration. And this has definitely, from what I can see in your Facebook posts and from what I hear, has been quite the process for you.
Yeah, that's fair for sure. And I should say before we even talk about Chalmers that cancer has always hit me a little differently because when I was in the fifth grade, my mom was diagnosed with what was supposed to be terminal endometrial cancer. And they gave her a couple weeks to live. She lived 35 years after that. She died 2016. And definitely a miracle, whether religious or scientific, however you want to look at it. I mean, it was not supposed to happen, but it did. And so because I felt like she was spared and because my whole family, my dad and I were spared too, whenever I hear someone else suffering from it or dying from it, it always just hit me a little differently because of that experience. And, I had my own little bout with cancer a few years back, although it was not life-threatening, but still, you start to ask yourself those questions. And then when you actually see somebody go through it and go through, the process of their body, basically withering away from the cancer, it's very hard for everybody involved. Obviously, it was hardest for him, but I was just one part of a group of friends of Chalmers that really, even more than me, they really stepped up to help him deal with his affairs. He had 2 dogs and a cat that his friend managed to get them adopted by a family in Texas. Taking care of all his stuff and his house and making sure he was getting the best medical care and raising for him and paying for that medical care. I mean, he was a very beloved individual. And you really, sometimes when you're going through life, you don't always realize how many people love you and care about you because everyone's living their life. But then, when you need them, to see who steps up is a pretty profound experience. And a lot of people stepped up for Chalmers because he just made such an impact with so many other people. So I'm so sorry about you and your friend, of course. I mean, it's just like I think we're all getting to the age now where it's a sadly kind of common experience that we're all kind of going through at some point.
Well, speaking of common experiences, I want to talk about this celebration that's going to happen before we really do get into the conversation about your long-standing collaboration and friendship with Chalmers. But you talked about the many friends that he had, and they're coming together next week at Hal and Mal's in Jackson to pay tribute to him, a musical tribute. Can you talk a bit about how that came together? Are you privy to the knowledge of how that came together?
Well, it basically came about, and I'm not privy to everything that's going into the organization of it. I probably will learn a little more in the days to come, but I do know that it really kind of came through that process I described earlier, where all these friends were really trying to step up and help him. And, Chalmers was a former member at Wells United Methodist Church in Jackson. And performed there many times over the years, and still very close with many of the people there. A lot of musicians are members at Wells. And Keith Ferguson, who's the director of Wells Fest Cares, was really kind of he and Ralphie Sims, I believe, local bassist, who's kind of like Mr. Jackson music. Those two are really, I think, the driving force behind getting this together. I just know Chalmers was a revered musician in the Jackson and Mississippi and really Southern music communities. When I would go up to the hospital and spend time with him during his last weeks, pretty much every time I went up there was another musician out there who was trying to let Chalmers know how much they loved him. And so this is really just it's just an outpouring of love and respect and affection for him.
And I would say it's well earned because Chalmers Davis, as we are learning, I think a lot of people are just now learning about who he was and what he did from some articles that have come out in media. He earned his way playing for decades with Little Richard, and people might not know that, but they need to know this about Chalmers Davis because some musicians tend to be more low-key, especially if they play a kind of a side role, but brilliant musicians nonetheless. And so Chalmers may fall into that category. He played with Little Richard and for Little Richard, and also recorded with so many other people, including Johnny Cash, and had a fantastic career. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Fingers Taylor, who was another Jacksonian who was around for so many years, and he passed away last year, and maybe people didn't exactly know who Fingers Taylor was, but these people deserve the recognition. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about how you came to know Chalmers and how you met him and came to collaborate with him.
Sure, and before I do, I just want to say, Fingers Taylor is very missed too. He was one of the best harmonica players in rock and blues and country music that I've ever heard, and it's kind of like the old acronym: if you know, you know. If you knew, you knew, and it's the same thing with Chalmers. So he and I got together back in 2009. I used to play in a duo with a fellow named Bob Gates, who, as it happened, was one of Chalmers' best friends from high school, and they played together too over the years, off and on. So Chalmers came to one of our gigs and just came up to me afterward and said, hey, I really enjoy what y'all are doing. I'd love to play with you sometime. Well, I knew who Chalmers was through reputation. I mean, I don't think you could be here and not know that. And he played on a friend of mine, Chris Derrick's, on his record, and I had heard that work and had really, really liked it. And so when he came up to me and said that, I'm like, absolutely, please let's exchange numbers and let's figure it out. So I used him in my performances, in my full band performances, starting not long after that, and for a couple years. And then in 2011, Bob Gates, he had a family tragedy, and it really kind of took him out of the loop for a while, and it really kind of stopped us being able to play together for a while. And as it happened, we had a gig scheduled, an out-of-town gig up in North Mississippi, and Chalmers and another fellow were on that gig. We were doing it as a band, and we had to very quickly figure out how we were going to do that gig, because it was really the next day after this thing happened. And so we decided, well, let's just wing it. Let's just figure it out. We'll do some of the same material, stuff that we'd always had a guitar player on, and we're just going to have to figure out how not to have a guitar player. And it went beautifully.
Coming up, you'll hear the story of perhaps their greatest collaboration. It's Scott Albert Johnson talking about Chalmers Davis on the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB. You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music. I'm Chris Davis, your host.
This next one is not, I don't want anyone to take it personally. I bet y'all know this song. It's an oldie but goodie. Short people got no reason. Short people got no reason. Short people got no reason to live. They got little hands, little eyes. They walk around telling great big lies. They got little noses and tiny little teeth. They wear platform shoes on their nasty little feet. Well, I don't want no short people. I don't want no short people. I don't want no short people around here.
You're hearing Scott Albert Johnson and Chalmers Davis on keyboards in a neighborhood concert back during the early days of COVID, when musicians weren't able to play out as easily and readily. Chalmers died back on September 14th. And Scott Albert Johnson and several other people will be taking part in a musical tribute to him October 17th at 6 p.m. at Hal&Mal's in Jackson. Part of the reason that this interview is happening is so you can get to know who Chalmers Davis was and what he meant to the music scene in Mississippi.
There was something between Chalmers and me, musically and personally, that just really worked. Personally, we just always got along really well. I mean, my wife likes to say we were like an old married couple, because we would bicker pretty frequently, but it was just bickering. I mean, it never went longer than a minute, maybe. I mean, we never, in all the 15 years I knew him, never had what I would call a real argument. And, that's pretty uncommon, I think. And it wasn't because we didn't have a superficial relationship. I mean, we really got to know each other really well. There was a lot of real caring and just love there. I mean, he would come to our house for holidays and for Thanksgiving dinner and things like that. My wife and kids adored him, and they adored him. I mean, and he adored them. Musically, one thing that's interesting about it is that Chalmers was obviously extremely good musician, no doubt about it. But when we started playing together, most of his work had been playing in bands as either a pianist or an organist. And most of his work with Little Richard was on the organ, at least in the early years. And also he had done a decent amount of solo piano, but not a ton, at least not professionally, as far as I know at that point. And as far as playing in a piano harmonica duo, I mean, that was certainly the first time he'd ever done that. It's kind of a little unusual. It really meant that we had to not build the chemistry. We had the chemistry, but we had to build the arrangements. We had to just figure out how it was going to work, and then we just had to, even with the chemistry we had to get used to each other. And we did. And I guess my point is, he really learned what was for him a whole new style of play in order to play with me in that setting. And he did it. I mean, he did it extremely well. And I don't know how many people at sort of that middle to late stage in their career would have been up for that or would have been able to do it. But he was such a professional and such a talent that he could. We had a nice little following, but we had something kind of unique, a unique kind of sound and sort of arrangements that, I don't think sadly, I don't think I'll ever probably get to experience again. I mean, it was one of those kind of once-in-a-lifetime sort of meetings that just really seemed to work.
Well, I think one of the finest examples of that, and I went back and listened again before we had we started having this conversation tonight, is the collaboration, the songwriting collaboration of you and he on your single Fragments, where you're singing about the cosmos and this existential dreamscape, and he's playing some piano riffs that really blend very well with your harmonica playing. And in the instrumental part of the song, there are a couple of different key changes, and it seems to just naturally fit. I would like to know how you guys came to write that song together. If I'm not mistaken, you wrote the lyrics, he came up with the chord changes. Is that right?
So we were on the road. We were playing some gigs on the Gulf Coast of Alabama and Mississippi, and we stopped at my father-in-law's house. He lived at the time in Biloxi, and he was out of town, but he would always let us stay if we were passing through. And so we got there late one night after a gig, crashed, woke up the next day, and I'm getting up and kind of getting dressed and maybe making some coffee, getting ready to think about getting on the road to our next thing. And I hear this piano coming from the other room, and I walk in there, and he's on their baby grand piano playing this beautiful chord sequence. I'm like, man, that's really nice. And I picked up my harmonica. I kind of started improvising around what he was doing. And I thought, I was working on this set of lyrics, which was, I guess I was trying to write what I guess I thought at the time was like the song for me. In other words, the song that really sums up my view of the world. And, if I could write a song that says, okay, this is what Scott really believes, this is it. I was working on that, and as I was hearing this music, I'm like, this is kind of what I was going for. Chalmers had a very powerful style, but it wasn't powerful by, beating you into submission. It was just he used a lot of long sustains, and it just reminded me of something that I would hear if I was contemplating the universe and looking up in the sky, and that's what the song was about. So I said, can I just record you playing through this a bit? It doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be in any kind of arrangement or structure yet. Just let me hear what you're doing and record it so I can take it with me to keep working on these lyrics. We did that, and I think I had the lyrics done about a week later. And then we recorded that song. Most of what I did on that particular record was done in real regular recording studios, but we recorded that at St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Ridgeland in the Center for Performing Arts, which is this really big, nice, acoustically wonderful performance facility. And I have a friend Tim Cotton, who had a mobile recording setup. He came and set up some mics on a grand piano and put a mic on me, and we got the piano recorded, and then I did my vocal and harmonica after that. And I look back at my past recordings, and I'm still mostly proud of most of them as far as the songwriting goes. But there are things I hear about in my own performance or the way I chose to produce it or whatever, or we chose to produce it, that I'm like, I wouldn't mind if I could do that again. I don't have any such feelings about Fragments. I mean, I'm still really proud of that from really kind of every standpoint. But what I appreciate the most about it is that I got to do that with him, and that it was a real collaboration. I wish we had more. We had some things that we were kind of dabbling in, some chord ideas he had that we never got around to finishing. But I'm really glad we've got that one.
I'm sleeping underneath the evening sky. I'm dreaming of a place far from now, imagining you right here by my side, not taking time to wonder why or how. And up above, the stars are shining through, lighting up a dark and ghostly screen. you don't see them quite the way I do. You're looking at the spaces in between. Are we just a simulation of someone else's meditation? Fragments of a deeper situation. And somewhere up there I can almost see a place just like the one under my feet, with someone just like you and just like me, walking down an unfamiliar street, in a place that died 10 million years ago, an ancient galaxy without a name. I take a look at you and I know that the distance is exactly the same. Are we just an improvisation, a divine hallucination, fragments in eternal acceleration? And then the dream awoke, and I was here, alone again, looking at the sky. The separation is all too clear, and so we send our rockets way up high, but it's all the same creation, endless information, fragments with an unknown destination. I'm sleeping underneath the evening sky.
You've got the Blues and Arts Hour and the story of Chalmers Davis and Scott Albert Johnson on 103.9 WYAB. You've got the Blues and Arts Hour on 103.9 WYAB, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music. I'm Chris Davis, your host.
And this is over here, a 23-year veteran of Little Richard's band, Mr. Chalmers Davis on the piano.
Thursday, October 17th, 6 p.m., it is a tribute to Chalmers Davis, a renowned keyboardist who lived in Jackson and who often collaborated with Scott Albert Johnson, who is the guest here on the Blues and Arts Hour today, talking about his friend who passed away September 14th. When you guys play as a duo, when you played in, whether it's Hal and Mal's or wherever you were playing, you had to play covers. What kind of covers did you guys like playing together most?
All over the map. One thing we definitely were not, even when we were playing covers, we were not a cover band. I'll give you an example. For a long time, we did an instrumental that was on my first record, which I recorded down in New Orleans, and it was the only cover on that record. It was Wynton Marsalis piece called "In the Court of King Oliver," and the original song is a quartet. It's a upright bass, drums, piano, and trumpet. And my recording was the same arrangement, but with harmonica instead of the trumpet. When Chalmers and I did it, it was just me and him. So, this is a Wynton Marsalis jazz song, which the original recording of which did not include the harmonica, and we just decided to do it anyway and make it our own. And that was the approach we had on most stuff. I mean, very few of the covers that we did originally had harmonica on them, for one thing. Many of them didn't have piano or keyboard. We just decided we like that song. Doesn't matter what genre it is. Doesn't matter, what some venue we think they want to hear. I mean, I've never operated that way, and I just don't really even know how to operate that way. And Chalmers was up for that. He was up for, we were going to put our own stamp on whatever we did. So we did stuff from jazz to some blues, but I've always been kind of wary of doing too much blues because I'm not really a blues artist, but I'm really more influenced by, the music I grew up with, the rock artists especially that I grew up with, like Peter Gabriel, the Police. We did songs by people like that. We did a Crowded House song. We did a Rush song. And then we would also do some old jazz standards like that weren't so well known, like I Don't Stand a Ghost of a Chance with You.
I need your love so badly. I love you oh so madly, but I don't stand a ghost of a chance with you. I thought at last that I'd found you, but other loves surround you, and I don't stand a ghost of a chance with you. If you'd surrender just for a tender kiss or two, you might discover that I'm the lover that's meant for you. And I'd be true, but what's the use in scheming? I know I must be dreaming, 'cause I don't stand a ghost of a chance with you.
We would do country. We did Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash. It was really a smorgasbord of a lot of different kinds of things because that really reflected how we were. Like, we both liked lots of different kinds of music, and that reflected what we wanted to put out in the world. And I should add that, of all the experiences that I had with him, very close to the top of the list would have to be our rides in the car to and from out-of-town gigs, and especially after the gig when we were either coming home or going on to the next place. We would play music for each other. We would have little jam parties where I'd say, okay, check this out, and I'd play him a song or a recording, and then he would do the same for me. And occasionally I would turn him on to some things that he really liked and had not heard, but more often it was him exposing me to stuff that I really needed to know about.
What is it that you want people to remember most about Chalmers? What is it that you want people maybe who didn't know him or didn't know of him, what do you want them to know about him?
First and foremost, that he was a profoundly warm and compassionate person, kind of sometimes hidden under a gruff exterior. And the more you got to know him, the more you realize just what a great guy he was. There are a lot of good musicians out there, and we're blessed here in Jackson and in Mississippi to have quite a few. The vast majority of them are great people, too. And Chalmers was at the front of that line. He's the kind of person that, you know, everyone walked away from meeting him just wanting to talk to him again. And so that's the first thing. The second, that's, you know, to me, that's always more important than anything. But also, he was incredible talent and just the consummate professional. I mean, he had been all over the world playing with Little Richard and other people. He played on Jay Leno. He played on David Letterman. He played at the Hollywood Bowl, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Wembley Arena. You know, he really did a lot of stuff, but you would never hear him brag about it. You would never hear him act or see or experience him acting like he thought he was any better as a musician or as a person just because of the experiences he had. Now, he would like to tell those stories, but it was more like the enthusiasm of someone who was grateful that they got to do these things and wanted to share it, not someone who was trying to impress you.
Do you mind sharing your last experience with him? Do you remember the last thing you said to him, the last thing he said to you?
I just told him I loved him, and, you know, and he had told me he loved me many times in those last days, but by the end it was kind of hard for him to do that. But he looked at me, and my wife was there too, and he looked at both of us, and you know, we knew. We held his hand, and, you know, it was hard. It's obviously, you know, you don't want to ever be in that position with anyone you love, but I loved him and he loved me, and I think we both knew that about the other.
If you'd surrender just for a tender.
You're listening to the Blues and Arts Hour every Friday morning right here at 9 o'clock on 103.9 WYAB, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi and Small Town Music. I'm Chris Davis. Be sure to tune in next week right here on WYAB.
Well, I know I must be dreaming, 'cause I don't stand a ghost of a chance. I don't stand a ghost of a chance with. I don't stand a ghost of a chance with you.
I finally got the song right.
All right.